guests, America's Governor Ron DeSantis, and Representative Byron Donalds. But before we get to them, Biden, Harris, Blinken, Sullivan, the four stooges. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should be embarrassed. They should be apologizing to Benjamin Netanyahu, the state of Israel, and the American people. Why? Because something fantastic happened last week, despite the fact that the Biden-Harris regime did everything they could to prevent it, despite the fact the whole Western world did everything they could to prevent it. What am I talking about? This entire episode has demonstrated that the Western world, whether it's Europe, whether it's the United States, under this current regime, has lost its moral clarity, has lost its moral courage, has turned on its own founding principles and belief system. This is really quite simple. There's nothing complicated about it. You had terrorists who invaded Israel unprovoked, specifically targeting babies, children, teenagers, women, men, with the most monstrous, genocidal tactics to kill them, to humiliate them, rape them, decapitate them, burn them alive. And what did the Western world do? Well, for about 15 minutes, they wrung their hands and they said, this is horrendous. And they condemned Hamas because talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. But when the going got tough, they actually turned on the victims. They turned on the Jews in Israel. They turned on the Israelis. They turned on the Israeli government. They turned on Netanyahu. They sought to dehumanize him. These four stooges, they sought to topple him. They undermined him. They had meetings with opposition parties. They had meetings with cabinet secretaries. They went around Netanyahu. They smeared Netanyahu in Axios, in Politico, in the Washington Post, in the New York Times. Why? Because they wanted to use October 7th to create a Palestinian state. They wanted to use October 7th to do something they've always wanted to do. Re-engineer the entire Middle East, to build up Iran, to build down Israel. And so they took this opportunity, this genocidal opportunity, to try and exploit the situation when the Churchill of the Middle East, Benjamin Netanyahu, was trying to defend his people. That's what I'm talking about. And now Sinwar's dead. No thanks to Biden. No thanks to Harris or Blinken or Sullivan or all the rest of these reprobates. In spite of them. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu said the leaders of Hamas are in Rafah. The enemy is headquartered in Rafah. We have to go into Rafah. And here was the reaction of Kamala Harris, who wants to be president of the United States, who wants to be commander-in-chief. She doesn't have any moral standards. She doesn't have any moral center. After the slaughtering of babies and women and raping them and murdering them, 251 hostages taken, 100 hostages still in a tunnel of rats. And this is what she had to say. Cut one, go.
We have been clear in multiple conversations and in every way that any major military operation in Rafah would be a huge mistake. Let me tell you something. I have studied the maps. There's nowhere for those folks to go. And we're looking at about 1.5 million people in Rafah who are there because they were told to go there, most of them. And so we've been very clear that it would be a mistake to move into Rafah with any type of military operation.
A mistake, but would there be consequences if he does move forward?
Well, we're going to take it one step at a time, but we've been very clear in terms of our perspective on whether or not that should happen.
Are you ruling out that there would be consequences from the United States?
I am ruling out nothing.
Boy, she gave her strong support to Netanyahu and the Israeli people and the Israeli government. Netanyahu made it clear, we're going to get Sinwar, and we're going to get the leadership, and we have to go into Rafah. That's the only way I can protect my people, he said. What about Joe Biden? Cut two, go.
I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah.
You
No,
define-
they haven't gone into the population centers. What they did is right on the border, and it's causing problems with right now in terms of with Egypt, which I've worked very hard to make sure we have a relationship. I've made it clear to Bibi and the War Cabinet, they're not going to get our support if, in fact, they go in these population centers. We've held up the weapons. We've held up the one shipment.
What a disgusting disgrace. Blackmail, threats, withholding weapons. That would be like FDR withholding weapons from Churchill while they're in the middle of the fight with the Nazis. Who's ever seen anything like this? And it wasn't just that. He was working with France and Britain and other European Union countries to try and get them the same thing. He literally wanted to cut off arms to Israel, which they've done today. A long list of arms, a long list of armaments, a long list of things that Israel needs to defend itself and to fight Iran. And I'll get to that in a minute. Our foreign policy is obvious when it comes to Israel. Israel cannot win. Israel must lose. That is the Biden-Harris foreign policy. And look how snarky they are. Look at them. Look how condescending they are. And then, of course, there's Blinken, who's a disgrace and a disaster. The State Department. What did he have to say? Cut 3. Go.
Handshakes and smiles aside, in the quest for a ceasefire with Hamas, Secretary of State Antony Blinken shot down Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan for a final Gaza invasion.
We will not support a major military operation in Rafah absent an effective plan to make sure that civilians are not harmed.
But a Netanyahu advisor confirmed